Alright, everybody, my Algebra 1 people, these are your 9.5 notes. This will be the first part of the 9.5 notes. This is just kind of getting like a basic, just kind of getting our feet wet with graphing rational functions. So basically, so these should be in your note packets that you have had before. As I said, you should have held on to those note packets from before spring break. So this will be where we pick up from. So graphing rational functions and graphs. So basically, when we look at rational functions, they're all based off of this parent graph, basically 1 over x. Okay, it's essentially whenever we have the x in the bottom of the fraction. All right. So there's a little bit of terminology here with some of the top parts here. So like you got horizontal asymptotes, vertical asymptotes, or the way you say that word is asymptote. And again, there's two types. So horizontal, again, you want to think horizon. Again, it's just kind of a straight left and right line like this. Well, vertical asymptote is going to be like this, kind of like straight up and down, even though it's not very straight up and down there. But essentially what asymptotes are is they're essentially kind of barriers where our graph will not pass. Basically, for the most part, like an asymptote, it's an imaginary line. So like a lot of times what we're going to do, we're going to draw them like dotted lines. Now you don't have to draw, I wouldn't draw this, I'm just kind of doing some demonstration. But essentially our graph is never going to touch this vertical asymptote, and it might, that's why I kind of put for horizontal asymptotes, it might touch or pass through. But for the vertical asymptotes here, you're going to have like the graphs are going to look something that looks like this, and it's never going to touch this asymptote here. It's going to get very, very close, but it's never going to touch. Okay, and then domain and range, that's your possible x values, possible y values. We'll go over that kind of as we go here. So let me just erase this stuff here. And we'll go ahead and graph the parent function that I already have circled up there. So the parent graph f of x is equal to 1 over x. So when we're thinking, so we want to plug our x values in. Now if we're thinking about this, what's the one number I can't plug in for x if it's on the bottom of the fraction? That number is going to be 0. But I can plug in numbers that are above 0 and below 0. So x cannot equal 0, but I can say plug in like a 1, maybe even a negative 1. Okay? And if I plug in, well, if I do 1 over 1, that just gets me 1, so that gives me that. If I plug in negative 1 on the bottom here, that'll just give me negative 1. Well, okay. And then what if I plug in a negative 2 and a positive 2? Well, 1 divided by 2 is just 0.5. And negative 2 is just going to get me negative 0.5. Alright. And then, let's see here, we're also going to, and let's just do 3, which that'll just get me 1 over 3, which is roughly like 0.3, something like that. Okay, so this is kind of how the table is going to look, alright? Because again, we can't plug in 0 for x. Can't plug in 0 for x at all. But we can plug any numbers that are positive, bigger than x, or negative, but not 0. Okay? So if we plug these numbers into the graph, do 1, 1. So it'd be like over 1, up 1. If we go over 2, up 0.5. If we go over 3, it's like kind of 0.3, so it's right down here. Then if we go over here, negative 1, negative 1. Negative 2, negative 0.5. If we do like another one, say if we did like 0.5 and like negative 0.5, well, if we do 1 divided by, 0.5, let me just do some math on that real quick here. You're going to get positive 2 and negative 2. All right, so again, we're just kind of graphing those out there. So 0.5 be right here, 2 would be right about here. Excuse me. And then negative 0.5, negative 2 right there. So these graphs are going to basically, as you get closer to 0, they're going to kind of go straight up like this. And then as you get kind of closer down to the x-axis being 0, it's going to kind of level off like this. And then this one's going to kind of do the same. It's going to kind of level off like this. Oh, that's not a good looking graph right there. So it's going to look something like that, okay? Where you got, like, it's going to look like this, and it's going to look kind of like down like this, all right? So if you see, like, if you're looking for asymptotes, our vertical asymptote here would be straight down. Basically, they would be straight on the axes, all right? So we'd have a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0, and a vertical asymptote at x equals 0, okay? So that's just kind of the basics of asymptotes, vertical asymptotes, all that kind of stuff, all right? We'll definitely work more with these as we go a little further there, okay? So I already got some of this stuff kind of written out here for the general form of rational equation. So you got y is equal to, a over x minus h plus k. We've kind of worked with these h's and k's before. When we're doing vertical asymptotes, you have a vertical asymptote at the h value. Okay, so that's kind of so this is the general form. We're going to get a little bit more complex, but as it stands, it basically is going to look something like this. All right. Another thing you can also think about to finding vertical asymptotes is set the bottom equal to 0. So you just set the bottom equal to 0 and then you solve. All right. So that's how you find your vertical asymptotes there. Okay. And then a horizontal asymptote is, basically just whatever that k value is. So it's just, plus k right there. Okay. So when we're looking at the general forms here, it's our h value that shifts the graph horizontally, which means it shifts it either left or shifts it, left or right. Remember, like, if we're kind of think of this as like in parentheses right here. So I might think like x minus h in parentheses. If it's minus h, it's going to shift it right. So if you say like x minus 5, it's going to shift it right 5 spaces. If it's say like x plus 5 on the bottom, it's going to shift it left 5 spaces, okay? So it's kind of opposite thinking, mostly when we think of right, we think of positive. When we think left, we think negative. But if it's on the bottom of the fraction, kind of like this, it's going to be opposite, essentially, okay? And then the k value, that essentially is, that's kind of like the same thinking. We're not saying like this, but it's kind of similar thinking. So if it's, say you have like a plus k, like say if you have like on the outside like a plus 3 or something, that's going to shift it up 3 spots. And if you have like say a minus k, like a minus 3, it's going to shift it down 3 spots, okay? Okay, so that's kind of the very basic general form of a rational equation. Let's go ahead and work through some of these here. So let's look at some translations here. So we have, y is equal to, 3 over x minus 2 plus 4, okay? Well, so for this first one, we're starting with 3 over x, okay? So that's our original equation. And we see with this x minus 2 on the bottom here, so we start with this x minus 2. That's our h value. I'll write it up here. So that's our h value. Okay. Since we have x minus 2, remember, minus 2, which is again kind of the same thing as minus h, that's shifting it, shifts right 2 spots. Okay. And then when we look at this plus 4 spot, that's our k spot. That's plus k, so plus 4 is plus k. That's going to shift it up. Remember, k is up and down. It's going to shift it up 4 spots. Okay? Same thing with this one right here. So we got x plus 5 on the bottom, negative 2 on the bottom, on the outside there. You have the plus 5. Remember, on x plus 5, that's our h value. That shifts it left 5 spots. And then this negative 2, that's our negative k value. Again, that's going down. Negative on the outside, that's going to go down 2 spots. Alright? And then right here, y is equal to 1 over x minus 4 plus 10. We look down here, we got the negative 4 on the bottom. Again, bottom, that's going either left or right. It's negative, so it's going to be going right 4 spots. And then the plus 10 on the outside, that's not in the fraction. It's basically the 10 kind of on the outside of the fraction. That means it's going to be either going up or down. The positive tells me it's going to be going up 10 spots. Okay? So again, that's basically when we talk translations. We want to see whether it shifts right or left, up or down, you know, all that kind of stuff. We got a couple other ones here, so we're kind of doing the opposite now, where we're given these translations and we want to write an equation given the translation. So we have translation of the original parent function, 1 over x. That's 4 units left, 5 units up, and then flipped over the x-axis. This is a bit of a newer one here. So if we start with this, go y equals 1 over x. So we see left. All right, so 4 units left. Again, left is our h value. So left or right is our h value. And because it's left specifically, that tells us it's plus. And then what's our unit? 4. So that's going to go on the bottom of the fraction. So it's going to be x on the whole bottom of the fraction plus 4. Because again, left is plus, right is minus. Okay. And then 5 units up, again up, tells me that it's going to be either going down, tells me that it's going to be the k value, so it's going to go kind of out here, not within the fraction. Up means it's going to be positive. If it was down, it'd be negative. So it's going to be plus, and then 5 units, so that's going to be plus 5. And then flipped over the x-axis, that's just, again, a fancy way of saying you're going to put a negative on the top here. You could also put, you could also technically put it way out front here, but you just say put the a value on top, negative. Okay. So now this one's looks a little bit different. We have a translation y over 5x. So we're going to start with this, and then also just kind of circle that one there. And actually, I'm going to rewrite this real quick right over here so we get a bit of a clearer picture. Y equals and then plus 5. Alright. So now this one's telling us we have asymptotes at x equals -2, y equals 3. Okay. So remember, if we have the asymptote x equals, that tells us of our, remember, x equals, that tells us we have a vertical asymptote. Now vertical goes on the bottom. Goes on the bottom of the fraction. So if it's 5 over x with the -2, I'm actually going to flip that sign, x -2. I'm going to put 5, and then it's going to be x opposite sign plus 2. Y equals x plus 2. And again, if you want to check, well, is this my vertical asymptote? Remember, so a little glitch there. So if you want to make sure that that's your vertical asymptote, remember, set the bottom equal to 0. If we go forward with this, go back to here, if I set x plus 2 equal to 0, I'm going to get -2. Okay? And then y equals 3. The y, that tells me it's a horizontal, HA asymptote. Alright? Y equals 3. So horizontal asymptote, y equals 3. That means that it's going to go kind of on the outside here of my equation. And because it's a positive 3, again, this stays the same. So it's going to be plus 3. Okay, so it's going to be that. Alrighty. So I'll try to get through this one real quickly. I'll only graph probably part of this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to back up and we're going to do this in another video. So for right now, in your so for your homework assignment, I'm going to kind of post more specific instructions on this when we get to Google Classroom. But only do the questions that basically look like this. So only really all we really want you to do is just do the write the equations, because you're going to have a couple questions that look like this. Write the equations with the given conditions, and you're also going to have determine the translation of the function. So I'll kind of explicitly state the questions that I want you guys to do in the Google Classroom post. But for right now, only do the translation questions, and we'll get to the graphing stuff when I come back. So again, thank you guys. Sorry I have to be out, but I hopefully see you guys real soon. Goodbye.